So, if you're new to this channel, we do this every year. Sony, of course, has an E3 press conference, and I do a video right after, doing not only a recap of the entire event if you perhaps missed the conference, but also my actual impressions of the conference, and of course, comparing it to Microsoft and whatnot, because, like, why not do that? It seems pretty typical. But anyway, a little timestamp will be right here if you don't want to watch the recap portion of the video. Basically, I'm going to go through every single announcement that actually happened, and then you'll get the impressions afterwards. So there's the timestamp if you want to go straight to the impressions of what I thought of the conference. But let's get right into the recap. Sony E3 2015 kicks off with a sizzle reel of games. Nice to see them doing this once again. Just a nice little clip of a bunch of games. Usually they, last year they opened up with Destiny, but they usually do a sizzle reel. Sean Layden takes the stage right off the bat. Last Guardian, finally we see it gameplay, coming 2016. Herman Hulst of Guerrilla Games comes, finally shows off their PlayStation 4 exclusive RPG Horizon Zero Dawn. So much like the rumors we were hearing about, woman with a a female protagonist, robot dinosaurs, open world RPG. It looks like very cool. Square Enix is up next, shows off a Hitman remake, very cool there. Street Fighter V comes up next, a little bit of footage. Beta July 23rd on PlayStation 4. Next up is No Man's Sky gameplay, just a little, about 2-3 minute section there showing off some No Man's Sky. Media Molecule up next. Finally, we know what Media Molecule is up to on PlayStation 4, and they show off the game Dreams. Very much what Media Molecule has been preaching for a while now. Play, create, share. You can use the DualShock 4 to create whatever the hell you seem to be creating in this game and sharing it with others. We really didn't get a whole lot of details about this, so this is definitely sort of a work in progress thing that we'll see later on. Still pretty far out, it looks like. Firewatch is up next, console debut for PlayStation 4. Adam Boyes takes the stage, shows off a little bit of Destiny, The Taken King, September 15th for that little expansion pack, or whatever the hell you want to call it, but Destiny was basically, did get some stage time here. Then Assassin's Creed Syndicate was up next, got some exclusive missions coming for that. No surprise that Ubisoft was here in some way, shape, or form. No surprise that it's Assassin's Creed. PlayStation has a long history there with Assassin's Creed. World of Final Fantasy announced for PlayStation 4 and Vita coming 2016. Very different stylized looking Final Fantasy game. We really have no clue what that's all about. Big bombshell here, of course, Final Fantasy VII Remake, first to PlayStation 4. This obviously tells you that the game is going to likely come to Xbox One and PC, but it is coming first to PlayStation 4. Final Fantasy VII Remake, this is absolutely legit. This is actually happening. And then I believe they do a little bit of an indie showcase here. We all kind of expected that to have a place in the show. And then moving on, Shenmue 3 announced for a Kickstarter, so not necessarily Shenmue 3 for sure, but we all know this thing's going to get funded pretty quickly. As of right now, it's already 50% funded, and by the time this video gets uploaded, I wouldn't be surprised if Shenmue 3 was completely funded. But they did announce the Shenmue 3 Kickstarter, so not formally that Sony's involved with anything in terms of funding it or whatnot, but if you do check the Kickstarter page, it says that it will be for PC and PlayStation 4. No other stretch goals involving it coming to other platforms. Then next up, a little bit of showcase for Batman Arkham Knight, just some gameplay there. Andrew House takes the stage and shows off some Morpheus. Guerrilla Cambridge is actually working on a Morpheus game called Riggs, which I believe is a 3-on-3 sort of first-person shooter type game. We didn't really get to see a whole lot of that. Not really a whole lot of Morpheus at the show. We'll get to that later. PlayStation Vue. Andrew House talks a little bit about PlayStation Vue. Launching in LA and San Fran, I believe, right now, currently. In January next year, I believe they announced they'll be allowing a subscription per channel model, so an unbundling package, which I believe is one of the first times we've ever had anything like this available anywhere. So that is very aggressive right there. You can finally pay per channel for what you want through PlayStation Vue. Again, very interesting. We'll get to that in a second. Also, PlayStation Plus members can get a discount there. Another big part of the conference, if you watch Microsoft's conference, this was kind of hinted at already. Sony and Black Ops 3. So Sony finally has exclusive rights to map packs first with Call of Duty from now on. Microsoft has lost that exclusivity. They probably dropped it or didn't renew it. We don't know what really happened there, but Sony is now partnered with Call of Duty, and the beta is coming first on PlayStation 4 in August. Then another sizzle reel of games. I'm not really sure why they did that. Probably to show a little bit of Vita love, because there was some Vita showcase in there. Nice to see some Vita. Then going on, Star Wars. So they show some Star Wars stuff. Exclusive Disney Infinity playset for PlayStation 4. Star Wars Battlefront gameplay. just showing us a little bit of that. And then the show closes with Uncharted 4, a nice little extended clip of some Uncharted 4 gameplay, which actually, initially, the gameplay demo kind of stalled out, and they had to reset it. Not necessarily sure what happened there. This is E3 after all. It's very hard to do all this stuff live, and mistakes are going to happen. If you remember, I believe it was last E3, there was like a bunch of mistakes in everybody's show, so stuff like this is kind of expected. But it was a nice little, long, little detailed gameplay of Drake driving around and the Jeep and everything, and Sully, and a lot of action and stuff. Pretty much Uncharted, which is what we all love. And that's pretty much it for the actual recap portion. That was Sony's entire E3 press conference. Now, of course, let's get into the actual impressions, right? Pretty big show. The big obvious 3 points here that we're all kind of looking at is The Last Guardian has finally come back. Final Fantasy VII is getting remade, which, you know, that's another big bombshell. And then Shenmue 3, which was like kind of like a cherry on top, right? It's like, holy crap, they did one bombshell. Holy crap, Final Fantasy VII. And then it was like, they're not going to do Shenmue 3. Boom, Shenmue 3. Now, these things are a little bit diminished in the fact that, well, The Last Guardian, no, there's not really no diminishing factor there, right? It's The Last Guardian. It's nice that we finally see it again. Final Fantasy VII Remake, it's a little bit diminished there because that it's first exclusively on PlayStation 4, but it's not completely exclusive. Now, of course, that's not a bad thing for gamers. That means everybody gets to play the game at some point, and that's definitely a good thing. I mean, but when you're looking at it from a business perspective, it's surprising that Sony didn't, or, I mean, it's not necessarily surprising, but you would have figured that Sony would have wanted to get that game, like, completely exclusive, or at the very least get exclusivity on console and the game also coming out on PC. I feel like no matter how much money it would have cost to make that actually happen, that probably would have been a really good investment for Sony to keep that game off of X1, just to keep their lead, right? Because granted, they're already like nearly a 2-to-1 lead worldwide against Xbox One, but it's just one of those things, right? You want to stay lean, you want to stay aggressive, so not really. It's like I said, it's not completely diminished, but it's not. The announcement is less impactful, I'd say, but it's still amazing that everybody gets to play Final Fantasy VII Remake, because that's exactly what we want. And then with Shenmue 3, again, that's slightly diminished there because it's not a complete Sony partnership there. It is a Kickstarter campaign that Sony basically gave a bunch of screen time to say, hey, here it is and everything, Shenmue 3, back this thing and we'll get it going. I don't know, it's not really completely diminished there. I mean, it's still pretty big news. The surprising thing about The Last Guardian I found is that when they showed it off, the game looks exactly the same. Now, I don't mean that in a necessarily bad way. I say it in a more surprising way, in that we haven't seen the game in so long, and you kind of figure so many things must have happened in the back end with Sony and the restructuring of Sony and what actually happened. And now that we finally see it again, it looks pretty much identical. And they did admit, yeah, it's on PlayStation 4 now. But it's just really funny how that was what was the struggle, right? What took so long? What was the development problems? Was it just bringing it to PS4? Was it a divide in like gameplay mechanics and story or something? Because visually the game looks exactly the same. Again, not a bad thing, just kind of a weird thing. I mean, the one thing that always bothers me about Sony conferences, and I mentioned this before the show started, and I was right when the show actually finished, is that, and this is always a criticism I have with Sony, is that they spend way too much time talking about things we already know about. E3 conferences are very precious in terms of time, right? There's only so much you can show. There's only so much you can do on that stage, so I feel it's important to use every last bit of it properly, and I can't stand when they bring up things like Assassin's Creed, Syndicate. Like, we just saw that at Ubisoft's show. Why do we need to see gameplay of this? You can show it on the show floor. Ubisoft clearly showed it at their own conference. Why is it there? Same thing with No Man's Sky. We've seen it how many times already? Now, we know there's a big partnership there with Sony and No Man's Sky. There's no big surprise there. But E3 is a long event. It's not just the conferences. You can show these things on the show floor. They don't need stage time. Same thing with Star Wars. I felt that didn't need stage time. Batman Arkham Knight, why did that need stage time? It's coming out next week, for crying out loud. I just feel like this time could have been better spent talking about other things, possibly new experiences, possibly new things, right? That's what we want to see out of E3. Now, not to start going to the Microsoft comparison, but when you do look at Microsoft's conference, now a good half of the games that they showcased at their show wasn't exclusive. They did have exclusives, but Microsoft also had first Xbox One. So granted that half of their show was also PS4 games possibly. It's just that they were still completely new games, and it's still interesting. It still resonates with people. Whereas here you're seeing games that we already knew about how long ago. We've already seen plenty of times. We don't need to see it again. Stop showing us this. Sony does this every single year at E3, and it bothers the hell out of me. Now, in terms of Call of Duty, I know a lot of people are thinking to themselves like, oh, Call of Duty, really? Like, you know, blah, 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 whatever. And I'm right there with you. I don't need to see Call of Duty at Sony's E3 every year, but that is going to be the case from now on, now that Sony is the partner with Activision and with Call of Duty. They're going to be there every year now at Sony's E3. So 2016, 2017, Activision is going to get stage time with their next Call of Duty at Sony. So yeah, I mean, I'm not interested in that. I'm sure plenty of you guys are not interested in that, but it's a completely understandable business move. Call of Duty is one of the biggest gaming franchises of all time. It's going to make Sony plenty of money. It's going to give Sony plenty of exposure. It's going to, you know, do even better for PlayStation 4 than PS4 is already doing. I mean, it completely makes sense business-wise, but it's just kind of a bummer that now we have to see it every year, because that's the one thing I always thought about with E3. It's like, okay, well, at least Microsoft can get all the Call of Duty stuff out of the way, and then Sony has time for all their stuff. But now it's in Sony's slot. Now, the big thing I want to bring up is Project Morpheus. Now, Project Morpheus got a grand total of like 2 minutes stage time on this show, and that's really surprising to me. I thought for sure Project Morpheus was going to play a pretty big role in this year's E3. I thought it was going to get plenty of stage time. We were going to see at least like 2-3 games from, you know, whether it was or was not Sony's first party studios. You know, N-Dreams is making a Morpheus game, which I forgot the name of right now, but they're making a Morpheus game. A couple of games have been confirmed already for Morpheus from third-party developers. I thought for sure Morpheus was going to get a lot of stage time, and it needs a lot of stage time because this thing is still confirmed for the first half of 2016. So this is E3 2015, and we still don't have a final product name for this thing. We still don't have a price for this thing. We still don't have Sony-supported games for this thing. What the hell are they doing? How are they not convincing consumers to actually buy a Morpheus at this point? I'm blown away that we do not know anything about Morpheus still. We still don't know all those elements that I just talked about, and it's this close to actually being released, which starts to make me wonder how committed they are to Morpheus, and if this thing's actually going to be ready to go by the first half of 2016, which seems like such a general release date. The first half of an entire year, which makes me think that's a pretty rough date where they probably won't even be able to hold that. Because then you got to figure how many other shows do we have until this thing actually launches, and this is going to be a big thing. Like, Morpheus is not going to be cheap. It's not going to be less than $300. No chance in hell, right? So you gotta spend a lot of time talking about Morpheus to get people to go out and buy this thing and convince people that this is going to be something that you actually need to get. And the fact that they are not doing it now is really, really worrying. But overall, obviously, a pretty damn good show. I mean, you gotta be a little like insane to not think this was a good show. And it's always one of those things where people can't separate their opinion from reality, right? You don't have to like The Last Guardian. You don't have to like Shenmue 3 or Final Fantasy VII Remake or Horizon or Dreams from Media Molecule. You don't have to like any of those things, but you've got to be out of your mind to not understand that tons of other people are totally psyched about those. I mean, specifically Horizon. Horizon looks awesome. Now, with that gameplay that Guerrilla Games showed, you gotta be insane to not think that that's compelling to the slightest bit, right? Looked awesome. It looked absolutely gorgeous, and it's nice to see Guerrilla Games finally flex their muscles a little bit and do something outside of Killzone. They're very well known for Killzone. That's all they do is Killzone. And I like Killzone. I like it a lot. Some people don't, but the point is, they're finally doing something different, and we can see that they're a capable developer that can do something different, right? So I'm really excited to see how Horizon turns out, which so far has definitely got my interest peaked. And like I said, aside from all the other stuff, like all the stuff that we don't need to see, like, Destiny anymore. Like, for crying out loud, the game's already out. I know it's important to show because the game has millions of concurrent players and people still love that game, but I just hate that it gets stage time. You can do this on a blog post, you can do it on the E3 show floor, there are other places you can do it. The stage time, I should definitely be for some new exciting things. Maybe that is new and exciting for some people, but I felt it shouldn't have been there. Now, with PlayStation View, again, I said we were going to get back to this. This is very interesting. They didn't spend a lot of time talking about this, but I feel like this could be pretty big. Because like I mentioned, I don't believe there's not many services that actually offer something like this, unbundling channels where you can subscribe per channel, right? This is something that even for a while, I believe Apple was rumored with trying to do, like an Apple TV, and Steve Jobs was quoted as saying that he cracked TV finally in terms of TV business and how that business operates. And we all know that it's tough because cable network and everything. Channels are always bundled together into one network, into one subscription price. And people have always wanted to pay per channel, like what channel they want it, and Sony's going to be offering that soon. If it's going to be a good deal or not remains to be seen, but also with the PlayStation Plus subscriber incentive, where it's like if you're a PS Plus subscriber, which most of you probably are, you're going to get a discount there. I think that's really interesting. And granted, PlayStation View doesn't seem very convincing right now, and it's like total subscription price. Who knows with the channels? I mean, it might be a really good like sweet spot there with subscribing to 1 or 2 channels that you might want or something, where it'd be affordable and it would make sense. Media Molecule's Dreams, we didn't see anything like that could tell us what the game is really about, but it's one of those things where it piques your interest. And I know for me personally, I've mentioned this a few times, this is why I like Sony platforms, that Sony funds games like these. Sony enjoys making games like these, and they enjoy showcasing games that are different and that are not going to be necessarily commercial successes, but are games that will more than likely definitely at least turn a profit and just be unique and different, right? So I can see how some people would find Sony's conference boring in regard to certain games like these, specifically Dreams, but when I look at stuff like that, I think that's cool, and that definitely speaks volumes to me. Now, of course, the big elephant in the room here is Microsoft. It's Sony versus Microsoft. People, that's like a total thing, right? We got to talk about that. So Microsoft had an impressive show too. Absolutely, no doubt, Microsoft had an awesome show. And I'm not gonna recap their show, but they did a lot of like I mentioned earlier, the thing I liked about Microsoft's show is that when they weren't talking about their own exclusives like Halo 5 or Forza or Gears 4, right, they were talking about new games. So even though these games were like, first to Xbox One, but it's like, you'll still be able to play this on PS4 eventually, it's just that it was still something you'd never seen before, a completely new game, like Tacoma, Beyond Eyes, Cuphead. Like, those games looked really cool. And I was glad to see them just in general. Like, it doesn't matter that they aren't completely exclusive. Of course, it would have helped Microsoft if they were completely exclusive. It was cool to see the Dark Souls 3 trailer, Plants vs. Zombies 2. The big thing here, obviously, is Microsoft's biggest announcement, which was backwards compatibility for Xbox One. And this is a pretty big, hot-button issue, and if you remember, we did a Ryan on Gaming topic about this a while ago, about backwards compatibility. And I told you guys, with backwards compatibility, here's why the big hardware manufacturers, specifically Sony and Microsoft, aren't doing it, because it would cost too much money. There's no hardware-based backwards compatibility in Xbox One or PlayStation 4. When I say that, I mean that there's not a PS3 built into a PS4 to play PS3 games. They'd have to software emulate. Same thing with Xbox One. But what's absolutely mind-blowing about that announcement, and for me is the biggest announcement out of all the E3 conferences so far. Final Fantasy VII, sure. Last Guardian, sure. Big announcements. But I was blown away that Microsoft announced backwards compatibility for Xbox One, because people look at this and they just don't understand the actual reality of what went into actually doing something like that, which is, and I'm not necessarily sure how they pulled it off. I'm assuming it's software emulation, because they announced that roughly 100 Xbox 360 games will be natively supported, backwards compatible on Xbox One. Meaning you can use the disc or you can use the downloads, but it is going to work natively. And I read that you have to, when you put the disc into an Xbox One, you have to still technically download the game and then play it that way, which tells me that it's definitely some sort of workaround, right? It's some sort of software emulation from their server, from their network or something. But the way they're wording it in terms of only so many titles are supported, it's a publisher by publisher thing that needs to get approved, tells me that it was definitely a hurdle for them to get this to work. And that's what's amazing, that they got it to happen in the first place. And absolutely kudos to them. That's amazing that they pulled that off, because in that video where I was talking about backwards compatibility, I told you, here's why Sony and Microsoft would not do that, because it would cost too much money, and obviously, they want to resell you their games. But amazing that Microsoft actually proved me wrong in that sense, where they're like, we are going to invest that money into letting people play their old games. We are going to put all that time and effort to prove to you that this was a really important thing to us. Your feedback means a lot to us, and we actually want to do this for you. And they kind of had to do something like that. They definitely have to try and get people to buy Xbox Ones, because it's losing a lot to PlayStation 4. They want to sell more of those things, and that's definitely one way to do it. And I can see why people would say that Microsoft won E3 based on that fact alone, because even though big announcements like Final Fantasy VII and Last Guardian and Shenmue 3 are pretty big, those are games, right? Obviously, games are a pretty big deal, but it's very subjective in that way. It's very opinion-based. People, like I mentioned earlier, people cannot separate their opinions from reality. Some people are going to really resonate with those 3 games getting announced, but something as general as backwards compatibility sits well with everybody. Who would have a problem with that? Nobody has a problem with that. So therefore, everybody loves that announcement, and that's why some people feel that that one announcement really just hits it home for Microsoft. And I can understand why some people feel that way, that Microsoft had a better conference. Personally, I think Sony still nudged it out just a little bit, and that's only because they had such big 3 announcements on top of Horizon looking so great, and personally for me, Dreams looked super cool, but again, I can see how not many people would care about that. The other big thing about Microsoft's conference was the HoloLens with Minecraft. If you didn't see this, it's pretty interesting. It's the HoloLens peripheral on X1. He looked at this table, and it built basically the Minecraft world, and it was very interactable in a certain sense. Augmented reality and all that junk. And it was definitely a wow factor, but I would totally stay skeptical on something like that. Of course, the technology is very impressive, but I'm already hearing from people on the show floor and everything that it's very sketchy. Like it's very finicky. It's very hard to use. It's very the field of view isn't that great and everything. And I can totally believe that, because this reminds me exactly of all the other technologies we've seen before, whether it was Kinect on 360 or PlayStation Eye, back to iToy on PlayStation 2, even way further back to older technologies on like SNES and things like that. These things always look super cool when they're shown in promo form, but once you finally get them into your house, they just do not operate like they're supposed to, and they're very hard to actually get to operate like they were shown. So HoloLens, I'm sure, is totally impressive to a bunch of people, but I wouldn't get too psyched out about that thing, especially since it's so unique. It's too unique, right? The HoloLens is so unique in a way where game development for that really wouldn't make sense, and it's not practical. When in reality, it looks super cool, but like, how are you gonna play that? You'd mess with it for like maybe a few days or something, but like you can't. That's just not a practical way to play games, and it's not really something that is going to be able to be worked upon in big game development, right? Like it would be too big of a hurdle to get to be a really successful peripheral, so I'm going to stay extremely sketchy on the HoloLens. So yeah, Microsoft's big announcement for sure was the backwards compatibility. Of course, again, they had all their big stuff like Halo 5 and Forza and everything. The partnership with Valve, of course, is a very big deal. Probably one of the slower moments in Microsoft's E3 was when, like I mentioned with Sony's conference, they showed stuff we knew about, like Rainbow Six Siege or whatever the fuck, the Division trailer. I mean, we don't need to see those. We just don't need to see those. Fallout 4 mods on X1. I know a lot of people are going to mention that. That looks pretty cool. But I believe Bethesda has already announced that that's like something that they're going to try to do with PS4 as well, and that makes sense because it's Fallout 4. It's a multi-platform game. They're probably going to. Yeah, I just see that. I just see that happening on PS4, and it sounds like that's something they're going to do. They announced an early access type thing on Xbox One too. I don't know if that's necessarily a good announcement. I'm not totally a believer of that model, since there's not really a whole lot of success coming out of it with Steam personally. So, but now I'm just getting into like a full-on Microsoft recap when, again, this was a Sony discussion. So, but yeah, I pretty much said what I needed to say. Other than that, I think it was a really good show for Sony. I think it's obvious it was a really good show. Again, you got to separate your opinion from what really happened, and that's that Sony showed a lot of fucking cool shit. Might not have been cool to you. Definitely makes sense if you think Microsoft had a better show. But yeah, Sony definitely had a really awesome showing. A lot of cool stuff. I'm just shocked that they did not show more Morpheus. I'm annoyed they still show games that we constantly see. I'm sure a lot of the hardcore Vita fans are still pretty upset that there's not a whole lot of Vita love. We've been over this 30,000 times on this channel when it comes to Vita. It's just a platform Sony can't invest that much money into anymore. But they'll still manufacture the system and sell games for it and let people make games for it and everything. PS4 is obviously their breadwinner right now. It makes complete sense as to why they're focusing so much on it. Other than that, you'll also notice, and I'm surprised this actually didn't get any screen time, but there is now a media player on PlayStation 4. That's actually an app, so if you go to the PlayStation Store right now, scroll down to apps, you can download this right now, and it's DLNA support. I'm surprised they did not mention this on stage. Could have took out one of those third-party games that we know about, but hey, media player, so you can play, you can do a media server from there, and you can also play music, picture, and video files from a USB device. What really irritates the living shit out of me is that those are your only two options. You still cannot save content to the hard drive. Why? This was a launch feature on PlayStation 3. Every PlayStation 4 ships with a 500 gigabyte hard drive. Why can I not save the content to the hard drive? Why do I need a USB drive? Oh my god, that irritates the living hell out of me. I'm sorry, huge rant. Probably 4 people care about this like I do, but why is this not a feature? Why would you even bother making a media player app if you can't? Why can't I save it to the hard drive? Why? Who fucking uses USB drives like that? Who has a USB drive with all their shit on it? I mean, I don't. Maybe you know, you guys do. I don't. Why can't I save it to the hard drive, Sony? Anyway, that's about it. I'm more than certain I'm leaving something out because I totally am. I don't know. I mean, EA and Ubisoft's conferences were pretty typical. You know, Ubisoft showing off their games, EA showing off their games, sports, and blah 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 blah. Probably the worst part of E3 was during EA's show where they're like, "Now let's talk about mobile," and they were showing us a mobile game, and it was like, "Oh my god, what the hell are you doing?" Low point for sure. Anyway, that's about it. So as always, E3's not over. There's still going to be tons of extended looks at all these games, hands-on impressions from people. More news is going to come out about all the things we've learned about at the conferences, some cleared-up details that we maybe didn't get, some details that I probably missed out on. We'll definitely cover up in Let's Talk PlayStation this Friday. So definitely be on the lookout for that. But otherwise, this was my E3 recap and impressions for Sony, Microsoft comparison, all that. And of course, the comments is a great place to obviously leave your opinions as well, so do that. That's it for me. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I'll see you guys all on Let's Talk PlayStation this Friday. Not next Friday, this Friday.